A secret report within the guild. Hello, new patrons. Something you ought to know about me is from time to time I just nerd out. Today is one of those days. Normal service will be resumed shortly. So, there is a new film adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune coming out, and thus far I've got to say the sign's pretty good. For a start, it's directed by Denis Villeneuve, one of the best directors currently working, and the man who pulled off the literally impossible by turning out a worthwhile sequel to Blade Runner a couple of years ago. And also, the casting appears to be absolutely bang on the money. Every time a new actor was announced as being in it, I instantly guessed which character they'd be playing, and I was right every time. Rebecca Ferguson, well, that'll be Lady Jessica. Javier Bardem, gotta be Stilgar. Dave Bautista, Beast Raban. And in the new edition of Vanity Fair, they've done a first look at Dune with some stills from the new movie. So I read this article and I was disappointed to notice that in the middle of it they take a bit of time out to say something snarky about the last time there was a film adaptation of Dune, the one directed by David Lynch, which came out in 1984. Technically the last but one, actually. There was a mini-series adaptation on the SciFi channel in about 2000, but pretty much everyone seems to have forgotten about that. And I realised with a sense of weary resignation that until this movie comes out, and probably for a good long time thereafter, I'm going to have to read lots and lots of articles about how David Lynch made this terrible movie of Dune back in 1984. Puh, silly old David Lynch. Fuck off. David Lynch's Dune is fucking awesome. And here's why. 5 reasons you are completely wrong about David Lynch's Dune. Number 1, it looks amazing. Now, while I'm genuinely optimistic about this new Dune movie, I'm looking at these stills in Vanity Fair and I'm thinking, well, the production design looks a bit, well, timid. There's a shot of the House Atreides nobles and they're all just wearing sort of black coats like Donald Gleason's uniform in Star Wars. There's a shot of Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck and he appears to be wearing stormtrooper armour. It kind of all just looks like any other science fiction movie. And Dune should not look like any other science fiction movie. The thing about Dune is it's not set in the near future like Blade Runner was, nor is it set like 200 or 300 years in the future like Star Trek. Dune is set very specifically 8,500 years in the future. It's a human civilization which is twice as removed from us as we are from the ancient Egyptians. And moreover, it's a human civilization in which technology has taken a complete left turn. In the Duneverse, technology is basically biological in nature. If you read the book, the story takes place a few hundred years after a Terminator-style rebellion of the machines. After which, all artificial intelligence was banned. So there are no sentient computers, no autonomous robots. And as such, all complex computations have to be done by people, specifically people jacked up on mind-blasting space drugs. So you have these guys called mentats, human computers, who take this drug called the juice of Safu that supercharges their brain. And space travel is facilitated by these guys called guild navigators who are all tripping their tits off on this psychotropic spice called maligned, which enables them to bend time and space with their brains. Did I mention that this book came out in the 1960s? So if ever there was an excuse to go absolutely batshit mental with the production design, it's Dune. So David Lynch's Atreides nobles didn't just wear black coats, they wore these glorious Ruritanian uniforms like something from 19th century Europe. And all their technology had this kind of steampunk aesthetic. It was all polished wood and brass. And as for the bad family, the Harkonnens, fucking hell. And we haven't even seen what the Harkonnens look like in the new movie, but I seriously doubt they're going to look anything like they looked in David Lynch's movie. David Lynch's Harkonnens are not just bad, they are literally all drooling perverts. They've got this fabulous S&M aesthetic. They all strut round in black rubber overalls. And their home planet, Giedi Prime, is this stinking, polluted industrial nightmare. The head of the family, the Baron Harkonnen, is literally a hovering mass of boils in rubber dungarees. So yeah, Dune should not look like any other science fiction movie. And David Lynch's Dune did not look like any other science fiction movie. Number 2, stop laughing at Sting's rubber codpiece. Now, I remember back in the 1980s, probably the fastest way to get your movie sneered at ahead of time was to announce that you'd cast a pop star in a leading role. Now, weirdly, of course, David Bowie appears to have been given a bit of a retroactive pass on this one. But I remember back in the 80s, when David Bowie was announced in being in things like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, or The Hunger, instantly the eyes would start rolling and be, oh, here we go, Mr. Popstar thinks he can do the acting. Yes, even Labyrinth. Trust me, I was there. So obviously the fact that Sting was cast in the part of Fade Routher didn't do the movie any favours even before it came out. Now, interestingly, there's no word yet on who's playing Fade Routher in the new one. Apparently they're doing the Stephen King's It thing of cutting the book into two halves, so we may not even get to meet him in the first movie. But for the record, Fade Routher is basically the counterpart to the hero. The protagonist, Paul Atreides, is the son and heir of the good family, the Atreides, while Fade Routher is the debauched princeling of the bad family, the Harkonnens. Now, Sting doesn't actually get very much to do in the movie. He's not in it all that much, considering how big his head was on the poster. But everything he does really well. Admittedly, both characters are cast a bit too old. They're meant to be 16 in the book, and Carl MacLachlan, who played Paul, was about 24, and Sting was at least 30. But the bit that everybody still goes on about is this scene in which Fade Routher emerges from a steam shower, clad only in a black rubber winged codpiece, while his uncle, the evil Baron, sort of gazes at him lasciviously. Now, two reasons why this is okay. One, the man put the gym time in, let him strut about in his pants if he wants to. And two, I see something beyond mere lasciviousness in the way that the Baron gazes longingly at Fade in this scene. It's as if the Baron, who, as I say, is basically just a mass of skin complaints, knows that Fade is literally the only thing of beauty that this house has ever produced, and that makes it all the more urgent for him to secure his legacy by taking control of Arrakis. And anyway, if the new Fade Routher turns out to be Harry Styles in a black rubber codpiece, you'll all be laughing on the other side of your faces, won't you? 3, it's a mega-budget sci-fi epic directed by David fucking Lynch. I mean, that's got to be worth the price of entry on its own, hasn't it? I mean, these days, David Lynch is kind of regarded as the master of low to medium budget esoterica, but you got to remember there was a moment there in the early 80s when he was the next big thing. After the massive success of The Elephant Man in 1982, he was being tipped as, like, the next Spielberg by a lot of people. He was George Lucas's first choice to direct Return of the Jedi. What would David Lynch's Ewoks have gotten up to? Scarcely bears thinking about. But part of the reason he turned Return of the Jedi down is he was already slated to do this. Dune was, I think, at the time, possibly the most expensive film ever made. It cost, I think, $45 million, which is a good couple of $100 million in today's money. And much as before Thor Ragnarok came out, we were all wondering, what happens if you give Taika Waititi $250 million to make a movie? And the answer turned out to be, you get a $250 million Taika Waititi movie. Dune is a $45 million David Lynch movie. It's proper David Lynch, but on a far bigger canvas than he ever worked on before or since. I mean, if you've never seen it, surely that concept alone is enough to pique your interest, isn't it? It's like if they put Ken Loach in charge of the next Bond movie. Okay, it may not end up being the best Bond movie ever, but you'd want to see what he came up with, wouldn't you? 4, he got the damn thing done. You've got to remember that this was the 3rd or 4th attempt to make a Dune movie. The book came out in 1965 and almost immediately people started trying to make films of it. There was a famously long gestated and ultimately abortive attempt by the utterly batshit art house director Alejandro Jodorowsky. Whole books and documentaries have been written and made about how crazy that was going to be and how it's probably just as well that it never happened. Certainly after Alien came out, Ridley Scott was slated to make a Dune movie that didn't happen. So of all the unlikely people, David Lynch, the bequiffed weirdo himself, he actually got this bloody thing made. Now, okay, it's not a perfect film. It's patently been hacked to bits. There are whole chunks of the book missing. I would imagine at one point there was like a 5-hour version which actually made a lot more sense. Release the Lynch cut! But it happened. He did it. He got it made. He filmed the unfilmable book. Number 5. It's actually kind of ahead of its time. Now, alright, this is probably more to Frank Herbert's credit than to David Lynch's credit, but Dune pulls off something quite extraordinary. Like a lot of science fiction, it kind of holds up a mirror to the present day. But unlike most visions of the future, which get more dated the further away you get from the time of creation, Dune actually gets more relevant with every passing decade. Broadly speaking, the premise of Dune is this. Rival imperial factions are competing for control of a remote and hostile desert region, trampling all over the rights and dignity of the indigenous people as they do so, because this remote desert region is the primary source of the substance they need to keep their transportation network moving. Now, I'm not sure how relevant that felt in 1965. It felt fairly relevant in 1984. Ooh boy, does it feel relevant in 2020. In fact, with particularly alarming prescience, Frank Herbert uses a lot of Arabic and specifically Quranic phraseology to depict the world of the desert dwellers, the Fremen, who ultimately become the rebel heroes of the story. It is going to be quite interesting to see how audiences in 2020 and 2021 react to a story in which the good guys are basically the Mujahideen. So yeah, I'm going to go see the new Dune. Assuming we're allowed out of the house by then, of course. And if you haven't seen David Lynch's Dune, you should definitely check it out. It's a flawed masterpiece, but a masterpiece nonetheless. Okay, stay safe, stay well, stay home, and I'll see you soon. This video was made possible by the supporters of my Patreon project, who help me make fun things while receiving great perks and rewards. If you enjoyed it, why not follow the link and join us?